Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on gear, books, events, fitness, trails, health, festivals and more. This podcast is number 40, going out on February the 13th. So it's a Friday the 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. What could possibly go wrong? It would be nice if it would stop raining, but at least we've got not winning medals at the Winter Olympics to tide us over until the weather improves. Let's see what there is on February the 13th. It's Cheddar Day, Tortellini Day, Desperation Day, which I think is more than once a year, and there's a silly one, Winter Bike to Work Day. Not quite sure how that can be international when it's not exactly winter in the Southern Hemisphere. Anyway, it's Apology Day, and I'm sorry, but that's just silly as well. It's also Blame Someone Else Day, which is more common than just one day of the year as well, especially in politics. And for some reason it is Get a Different Name Day. Well, when you have a name like ours, which is Cornwall, every day is Get a Different Name Day. I've been Cornwall, Cornell, Connell, and many more. My favourite day, though, is Radio Day. I guess this is kind of like being on the radio again in some ways, only without the panic of being live. We did have a red button in the studio next to the console, and that was called the dump button. So what you basically did was you dumped or killed the broadcast if somebody swore. We once had a very drunk professional NHL Hall of Fame hockey player on our sports show, live, badly slurring his speech, and every time he said a word beginning with F, we were very nervous and our fingers were hovering over that button. Anyway, we survived, and we got autographs, although they weren't very clear ones. I digress. It's the day in 1322 when the Tower of Ely Cathedral fell. And I checked, and there's not one Instagram post showing it happening. How times have changed. Birthdays? Well, musically, we have Peter Tork of the Monkees and Peter Gabriel from Genesis. And so, to make it 3 Peters, also it is the birthday of Peter Kern, who I admit I have no idea who he is. Anyway, he's an Austrian actor and director. Let's move on, and last time we chatted about the tree planting app called Treacly, which turns steps to saplings. And we had a special offer too, where you use the code WalkingPost to add an extra tree in the app if you sign up. They all make a positive difference. This week we have a conversation with Jason Lennox from the One Arrow Foundation, who last year launched the Recovery Road, a collective walk to raise awareness and funds for mental health and substance abuse. Before we get going, if you do have news, guest ideas, or even subjects to cover, or comments, or if you want to advertise, please do get in touch via walkingpost.com, or you can just email me at jim@walkingpost.com. Okay, let's go through some of the headlines of the news articles you may have missed that we had on walkingpost.com this past week. There's a new power bank for walkers, something I value there. A power bank that not only charges your phone and devices, but doesn't weigh about the same as a brick. There's a consultation on a link between Govan Partick Bridge and Pollock Country Park in Glasgow. And what sounds like another great idea, a new experience in Japan combines a walking tour with a print workshop. There's a new section of the King Charles III England Coastal Path opened, and that's a 35-mile stretch near Chichester Harbour. The schedule for the Causeway Coast and Glens Walking Festival 2026 has been announced, and if you've never been to the north coast of Northern Ireland and you get the chance, I would highly recommend it, as long as the weather's decent. Something I saw this week that looks amazing, but I'm too old and my son is too young. There's a contest to do some work. Really, you can win the opportunity to help build part of a trail. Sounds like hard work? Well, maybe, but the clincher is it's an all expenses paid trip to Chile to do the work in the Patagonia National Park. If you enter, good luck. And if you win, I shall expect you to come on the show and do an interview to tell us all about it. There's a study that says backward walking could help MS patients. And finally, more Scottish news, a Renfrewshire walking and cycling path is being extended. And you can read all of these and more at walkingpost.com. So it's time for this week's chat, and it is with Jason Lennox of the One Arrow Foundation, who launched the Recovery Road, and that is a walk for mental health and substance use. Last year, Jason walked from West Virginia to Kentucky, then to Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, 505 miles in 24 days. This year he's going on a longer trip that will take a bit longer than 24 days, and that is the entire perimeter of Minnesota, the state in which he lives, and that will total 1,776 miles. So, lots to chat about. Hi Jason, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast to talk about your work and your walking. Maybe to start, you can tell us a little bit about the foundation and about your life up to that point.
Yeah, I started the foundation last year. I've actually had a consulting firm, One Arrow Group, that has been in existence for a while. And so my background is in behavioral health. I've worked in the behavioral health industry for 11, 12 years now. And prior to that, I have consumer experience on the other side, going to treatment when I was 24, just a long stretch of 12 years from 12 to 24, where I struggled with many substances, with mental health, and even before that with mental health, and in and out of jail, just lots of trouble in my life. And again, 24, I landed in treatment, was a consumer of mental health and substance use services. And that was in 2010. By 2015, I was in school for business and got into the industry on the front lines. And yeah, 10, 12 years later, I kind of weaved through different roles in the corporate setting and climbed that ladder, if you will, and then took all those experiences on the administrative side. I'm not a counselor, but administration. I took those experiences and built a consulting firm. So that's where we build capacity in the behavioral health space. And the foundation is really designed to serve as kind of the legacy arm, fundraising, awareness, things of that sort. So that's where the foundation came from.
You mentioned that kind of transformation at the age of 24. Is that a common thing for people that have been through those issues? What is it that kind of makes that transformation, I guess, that flips it over from just keeping going down and being able to do something about it?
Yeah, I think the chips have to fall in the right way, because we know that actually about 1 out of 10 people who could use help today actually get it. And then out of that percentage, out of that 10%, about 1 out of 10 will go on and maintain that recovery consistently. Now, some of them come back and it takes a few times, a few treatment episodes, things like that. So certainly they'll come back around. But to be in those shoes at 24, go to treatment and kind of stay the course, is you're talking less than 1% of the population who could use that help. So it's not all that common. And again, being younger, I was in treatment with a lot of people who were much older, who've just had a lifetime of damage that's been done. I really think it boils down to a couple things in terms of actually getting help and staying with it. One is a level of desperation, damage, etc. I think I had to get to the place. I remember I was 21 when I got to the place where I just thought that there was no way, there was no redemption, there was no hope for a decent life. I lost my father when he was 39 from cirrhosis of liver, so he drank entirely too much and ended up killing him. And so I just assumed I was on his path. And I came to that state of hopelessness, as I like to call it, which is not a good place to be, but it was also the place where I stopped pretending like, if I just drink this amount, or if I just drink this kind of liquor, if I take weekends off, playing those kind of mental gymnastics. It was over for me. And so by the time I got to treatment, I didn't have a itch that I would go out and figure it out. I just knew that my life was over. So their desperation was there. And then the right people were placed in my life to kind of guide me through that. So I think it takes at least those two as kind of core components for people to get well. And that's to be at that level of kind of desperation. People call it rock bottom, whatever you will. And again, the right people and environment kind of support around, because it's not something we can do alone.
Is it a thing where you have to want to be helped, or are there people that get into recovery and treatment where they're just either don't care or aren't capable of seeing the future? I mean, does it work for that whole spectrum of people, from the ones that are desperate to get help to the ones that could care less?
Yeah, I've honestly been with people from all walks of life on that spectrum. People who, like me, didn't think there was any help, but I just went because the jail cell was more painful than I thought the treatment center would be. People who, went in with the idea that this is going to be it, this is going to be the time. People who said, I'm here because my judge told me to be here. I don't really want to be sober. I don't want treatment. All those kinds of people I've watched become successful and actually get it. So, there's a stigma, kind of misperception out there that somebody has to want it, and if they don't want it, I'm not going to help them. If you're not going to help yourself, I'm not going to help you. But the problem with that is, again, anybody can get it, and oftentimes people who look like they don't want help are kind of disguising something. There's something masked underneath, and really, they're in pain underneath, and throwing the keys away and saying they don't really want anything can be very damaging.
Are there any stats on mental health and addiction? I assume that it's probably a bigger problem than most people would like to admit.
Oh, yeah. Mental health, we know that, 1 out of 4 people could be diagnosed with a mental illness today. And we know that close to 1 out of 5 could be diagnosed with some form of substance use. So, if you just do those numbers, you get in a room and you're with 4 people, you can look around and go, one of these people is really struggling. The number is like 1 in 10 people who are really struggling with a major depressive episode at any given time throughout the year. So these people are all over. And that's, I think, another reason I do a lot of on the speaking side in my profession. It's really about educating people and helping people understand how close to home this is. Because most of the time, these kinds of things, I like to say, they don't hit home until they hit home. Oftentimes that can be too late. So bringing awareness and education and this data to people, going, you're looking around at any given time at somebody who's walking around struggling. More kind of alarming are the statistics about people who don't get help. So about half of people in that 1 out of 4 don't get help for mental health, and 90% of people in that 1 out of 5 don't get help for substance use. That's what I think the biggest problem and the biggest opportunity.
You would think that there would be help in a load of places if the numbers are that high, and it just clearly isn't there.
2 problems with people getting help. Well, the statistics show it's depending on mental health. Mental health is about 80, 85. I think substance use, about 90 to 95% of the people who don't get help don't do it because they think they should be able to handle it on their own, or that they don't need it, which, as someone who's experienced that, behind that oftentimes is, well, that means there's a problem with me, and so I'm not going to come out and share that with people. So that's the biggest barrier, is you have the vast majority of people who just can't externally accept or admit, that there's this problem that I need outside help with. And again, that's rooted in stigma, insecurities, things that we tell ourselves about ourselves when we go down that path, because it does feel like we're supposed to be able to handle life, and we're adults and we're grown and should be able to take care of ourselves. And so I think that's where the biggest problem is in terms of the help, is people they don't even open the door to get there.
Moving on to the sort of the walking stuff and the hiking, could you tell me a bit about the recovery road and what that is and how that came about?
Yeah, we're in year 2 now. So the recovery road is a campaign that supports in 2 ways substance use and mental health through the foundation, raising awareness and raising funds. And I think it was a June night last summer. I was just sitting around thinking and doing my research, and the numbers had kind of come out, and I realized that in 2024, we lost about 307,000 people just in the United States to substances, alcohol, and suicide. And that number just kind of made me sick to start. And I sat with it and I sat with it. And I wanted to figure out how we could do something about it, remember the people we lost, honor those still here, and kind of have that conversation and raise some money as a byproduct. So I knew I couldn't do 307,000 of much. So 307 ended up being the target. And we were going to walk from West Virginia down to Nashville, where I had a conference that was the behavioral health conference, where really the discussion was about how to invest in this industry. We ended up walking about 505 miles. So we went from West Virginia through Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, down to Georgia, over to Alabama, and back up to Nashville. So it was about a 3.5-week trip. I had 3 different people who participated at different times. One was a former professional football player in the NFL, and his career ended because of mental health. And so we got him, and he was a lot of fun. And that's the reason we went 500, because that guy, we were walking 20, 25 miles, and there was a day he walked 45. He carried that pace much quicker than we did. So that's where we ended up, 505. But this year we decided me and a business colleague, just one of my best friends, he works in this space. He's got a mental health platform, technology, kind of social media for mental health. We're going to walk the perimeter of Minnesota, which is between 17 and 1,800 miles, depending on how you spin it. And we landed at 1776. We were able to work that out. It's the 205th anniversary of the United States and Independence Day. So that was 1776. So we're kind of honoring that and kind of recognizing that back then, a lot of people don't understand how much the United States actually struggled and was divided in 1776. You had a third of the people who didn't want anything to do with it becoming independent. You had a third that did. You had a third that just said, like a lot of us, I just want to live my life and survive, leave me alone kind of thing. So tying into that, but this walk is really about conversation. So we'll open the door and allow people to come out and walk, whether it's one day, 15 miles, 20 miles, a couple days. We'll stop at communities along the way, engage in speaking engagements, things like that. So last year it was really about conversation. We did raise some money, 50-ish thousand we got to, and so that was pretty good for year one. But really it was about conversation. Everywhere we stopped and had a conversation, somebody had a story, somebody was impacted, and it just created way more on the conversation side than I anticipated. So we're excited to do that on a much larger scale this year.
All right. Is it something that you encourage other people to do their own fundraising, or is this kind of like your fundraiser for the One Arrow?
Yeah, for the foundation, we'll kind of roll it all in. Anyone who wanted to participate could walk miles and log them from their own places in the country. And they did that. And so we had some leaderboards. And one of the options we gave was they could donate to a charity that lives in this mental health space. And so we did some kind of lateral donations to other organizations, but primarily this will help raise funds for the foundation and then build the conversation.
And where does that money go to?
Of last year, our goal was to set aside a pot of dollars that would help build treatment programs. And so we were able to support that a little bit. This year, I think we're aiming more toward kind of crisis management, timely support, and that'd be for families, for individuals. Unfortunately, just in the community I grew up in, we've had 3 or 4 suicides in the last 4 or 5 months, and one as young as an 11-year-old girl, which was just, heartbreaking to go to that funeral and to know the parents, etc. So we realize that there's a huge need there. And in the moments of crisis, in the moments when, even before that, where people are realizing that someone's struggling, they don't know where to turn. Families don't know where to find those resources. So I think we're going to support that kind of acute phase through resources. And then, of course, in these tragic situations, how can we step in? Because when someone loses someone like that, especially the example of the child, those parents, they're going to need help. And oftentimes there's so much stress that comes with losing someone financially, emotionally, etc. It's not even a thought that, hey, I better go seek some support on my own, or it's going to take me down a really bad road. So that acute phase and directing people to support and finding ways to provide support to those in need. We also had the Annunciation Catholic school shooting here that was big, where, a bunch of kids in Minneapolis, were shot and a few killed. And so my partner and buddy Luke, he was big, and his business supported them. So we just see that need so much when it comes to these dire situations. So that's where we're going to step in this year. We're going to raise funds to put together resources, and then to be able to distribute them to the people who are in need in those tough moments.
Do you ever think, wow, this is just such a big problem? How can you want to solve it all, I guess, but you can't?
Yeah, what's interesting is I had this realization after I went on this long walk, because again, the biggest part of it, even from afar, were the conversations and the people who would call in and text in, and all the commentary I saw when I was doing the live streams, and just the level of engagement that happened was good, because that's the goal. That's what we're in the space of. But at the same time, it opens the door to me seeing so much more of it too, right? And then I get back, and this situation with this little girl, for some reason, I'm the first one that 3 or 4 people call. And so it's just like, and going to these places, and people recognize that and they appreciate that, which is good. They said, you got to keep doing. I had moments at that funeral that I'll never forget. It's just like, please keep going. But at the same time, opening that conversation up so widely actually opens the door for all that energy, right? And so it does feel like, oh gosh, this is brutal sometimes, and the problem is so big. But one of the mottos of my life is I'm playing with house money, so I'm betting big. And by that, I mean, when I was 24 and I went to treatment, I didn't think I was going to live a day out of my 20s. I didn't want to, frankly. So to be here and to be 15 years down the road doing what I'm doing, I didn't plan on any of it. So it's all kind of bonus time for me, and it makes it much easier to go, I'm just going to give it all I can while I'm here, and it's not going to solve all the problems, but I'm going to feel good at night going to bed. And again, I didn't plan on any of this time anyway.
Were you a hiker before you did that walk last year?
Yeah, I love going out to Colorado. I've got some family out there, and Arizona. I've done some pretty neat hikes in my time. But as far as the walking and kind of that level of distance, that wasn't a normal thing. In fact, I think 15 miles is probably the longest day I'd ever had in terms of walking before that. And like I said, we came out of the gate and walked 35 day one, up and down hills, mountains, etc. And I was feeling it. But by day 6 or 7, it just kind of became the norm, and it was just, we're just going to go 5-mile legs. We're going to do 4 or 5 of those every day, and it just was so much easier to go, oh, it's just another 5 miles. I'll walk another 5 miles. So it took a little bit of adjustment, but then a weekend, it was kind of just the norm, and it was fun, and it was refreshing and relieving to just be out in nature and spending so much time, with our natural environment.
You didn't think, like, what the heck am I doing here?
Day 2, I'll call it day 2, I had between 2 feet and ankles 10 blisters, and it was then that I actually started thinking I might have to start looking for wheelchairs, because I've also had some knee problems. I've had some surgeries over the years, and the thing was, I always had the 307 in the front of my mind, and I remembered, and I engaged with all these people who submitted stories of people they lost, and I shared those every day, and I just was in all of that there was never a question for me about, will I get this done? Like I said, in fact, I was looking at options and how will I wheel the rest of this with a wheelchair if I have to, kind of thing. But all the pains went away after about a week, and it's pretty easy. I don't want to say easy, but it definitely just became the norm. But I never was questioning whether or not I would finish it, not with that kind of North Star in mind.
And what were some of the highlights and maybe even low points of that journey?
Doing it with people that I really get along with and can appreciate, that was helpful. I think there were a number of moments that had so much symbolism that it just having those reflections, because we were walking a lot of times, again, around mountains, backcountry roads, no shoulders, through ditches, you name it, and we saw it down there in that Appalachian region. And I had this realization one day that it felt a lot like recovery. I was out on this road facing 60, 70 mile an hour headwinds with the cars coming by. It was dirty. It was loud. It was boring. It was chaotic. I just feel like everybody was like coming after me kind of thing. I mean, I even had someone swerve at me one time, just like playing around, it seemed like. And so just having that kind of realization that, well, this is actually what recovery is. It's hard. It's out here. It's boring. It's lonely. It's chaotic. It's dirty. We're reminded of death all the time, all the roadkill. I never realized how dirty the highway system was. So that was interesting. But on the flip side of that, spending so much time in that kind of environment kind of forced me internally to bring about a level of joy, a level of interest, something, because I didn't have the things that we have, which are like the go out here and get the food and get the ice cream. I'm going to go play this music. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go sit in the sauna. I'm going to go hang out with Jim and have a coffee. Those things didn't really exist. So I was kind of forced to just go deep internally and start to create this joy and feel a love for kind of the world in a different way. And so I would say that was probably the biggest highlight, having that realization. And then on the flip side, being forced to kind of create the joy there. And it actually stripped so much of the meaning down. I'll never forget that. It just felt like the first time I got in a car again and I was driving down the highway, I went, all these people are flying by me and you get cut off, all the things that happen normally, and none of it seemed to matter to me. I just went, oh, okay. Whereas, we get in our uptight routines of everyday world, you're getting upset. What the heck are you doing? Who do you think you are? All that stuff. And so it made everything pretty meaningless in a very good way. What mattered and what meant something were the important things, thinking about my family, thinking about the people that we're supporting. So it was a great experience, and it's going to be, 3 times longer this year. So I look forward to more of it.
Do you think that hiking is a good help for people with mental health issues? I mean, obviously, everybody's different and what works for everybody's different, but do you think that hiking helps people with that?
I'm 100% convinced that a big part of what we'll try to do this year, and what I heard last year from people doing it, it got them out. It got them having conversations about things that they normally wouldn't. And I can tell you, it was one of the most life-changing experiences for me personally, but really it was much bigger than that. And the former football player that was with, again, he struggled with mental health, with substance use. That's how his football career ended 5 years ago. He was a Minnesota Viking, but he got to the end. And, as we were kind of wrapping up the part where he was there, he said, look, Jace, I've got 3 kids. I've had a wife, a beautiful wife that I got married to. I was an all-pro NFL player, climbed through those ranks and had everything I ever could have imagined. Nothing has changed my life like doing what I just did. He said, if I can walk 425 miles, there's absolutely nothing I can't do. And I noticed the change, the true change in, the way that he had conversation, the way that he approached things, the way he thought about things. We put them in a box that the rest of the population is used to, which is sit in a group room for 4 to 6 to 8 hours a day and give them information and expect that to do something without kind of calming this thing that's in them to always keep going and to be active. So we talked a lot about that and how people in his situation need more of that, because it's a very prevalent problem in professional athletes. They have this lifestyle, they have to keep up, they go through pain, all these things that easily kind of leads down the path of trouble.
The Minnesota walk that you're doing, how do you plan for that? Are you going to do it all straight, and where are you going to stay and those kind of things?
We're going to get some kind of RV so that we always had snacks, water, a little bit of reprieve. We'll definitely need it here. We were very fortunate to have 3 weeks of 75-degree weather, no rain, anything last year, but over 3.5 months in the Minnesota fall, we won't be so fortunate. Last year we did find a hotel, Airbnb, slept in the van, and that just got to be a little taxing and expensive. So we'll find someone who can drive a bigger RV, recreational vehicle that we can actually keep stuff in and put our heads down at night. In terms of the time, I have a big family week that we do every year in the cabins. It's in the middle of it. So I'll definitely take that week and kind of head back home. I'm guessing there'll be 3 or 4 of those scenarios where it's go back home for 3, 4, or 5 days or something, because they can't completely shut life down for 4 months. So that'll be the plan. And the other Luke, my partner in crime in this, will he'll come and go too. He's got a family, 4 kids at home. So yeah, that's how we'll plan that. But we've got a whole team. The board is fabulous, and they're mapping out all the stops, the distances where we can engage with communities, with universities. So we'll do some speaking along the way, and it'll get a little dicey in the northwest part of our state because there aren't a lot of roads, but we'll be up for the challenge. So yeah, we have a team that's planning the logistics of it, the public engagement. So thankfully, I'll be able to just get out there and start putting one foot in front of the other, and have to brave the elements and just the length of this 3.5 months. I suspect is just going to get a little more taxing mentally than the 3.5 weeks we did.
Minnesota can get pretty cold in the fall as well.
Yeah. So we're going to start and do the top half right away in July and August, since it's summer and it'll be warm enough. But it'll start to get cold even in the lower half when we get into end of September, October, for sure.
You mentioned about the awareness. Are you going to kind of dip into neighboring states like the Dakotas and Iowa and maybe even Canada to raise awareness?
Yeah, there's a good chance. Frankly, obviously, the border of the state doesn't follow an exact road, so we'll have to kind of weave back and forth. And anywhere we can find kind of community engagement along the way, that will definitely include places outside Minnesota, or all our neighbors. So yeah, we're excited to do that and just have that conversation and engage people and get people to come out and walk. I mean, that's going to be some of the most fun. A lot of people wanted to last year, but we were way out in the middle of nowhere from here, and it's not as easy to get on a plane and go walk for a couple of days. So I think we'll have a lot of participation in that way, and we're working on some really strong participation from folks who kind of are in that celebrity status, if you will, just to kind of bring awareness and have this thing take a life of its own. So yeah, we'll entertain all the ideas. It's fun. We've got our monthly board meeting this week, and so it'll be fun to see where the team's at and what's next for the next few months before we take off.
Minneapolis is kind of a 5-sport city, so it's kind of nice to have that opportunity to tap into that too, I guess.
It really is. And, these sports organizations are actually very generous, very community driven. So we'll have some good opportunity there. And frankly, Minnesota is in the spotlight right now for other reasons too. And, just some of the immigration stuff. And so the state has taken a hit emotionally from a division standpoint. This will be an opportunity for us to, again, tie back to. We don't always have to agree on everything, but I think one thing we can agree on is mental health. It's historically been bipartisan, and one thing we want to do is make sure we're helping each other and we're creating some sustainability and access and bringing the resources forward to people who struggle. Because when someone's lost, a little girl, for example, people aren't showing up at the funeral going, I believe this, I believe this, I lean this way politically or this way politically. They're just there to help, and they're just there to support and offer what they can. And I think that's what we have to get back to.
Is there a goal, like a financial goal, or is it just trying to raise awareness? Is that as important as the money?
When we first started this, money seemed to be kind of that was the bigger goal. Quickly realized that what's not only what showed up more, but what seemed to be more important was the conversation and the awareness and the giving people space to share about things, to talk about things, to be open about them, because it's what I live, breathe, eat, etc. So it's easy for me to feel that. But when I started seeing from all walks of life, all spokes of this world, people opening up and starting to share and coming forward, it really made me realize I think that's just as important, because when we talk about funding treatment programs, there are, I think, enough treatment programs. We could use some more, but I don't think that that's our biggest problem. I think our biggest problem, like I said, it lies in the data, which is 90% of people with substance use don't get help. And that's rooted in, I think I should be able to handle it on my own, which behind that is probably, I'm scared. I don't want to admit that there's a problem. I lived all these things, so I know what was happening. I didn't want to ask about treatment. That meant there was really something wrong with me, because the world kept saying, it's not that hard. If you don't want to go to jail, you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to do this, just don't drink and do drugs. And I started to believe that and went, yeah, it's not that hard. Why can't I figure this out? So that forces people to just kind of hold it within. And then on the mental health side, 75 to 80% of people saying, I should be able to do this on my own is also another way of saying, what are people going to think? And that's where we have to solve the problem, because if people aren't even getting to help, we could have all the treatment in the world. We could have the best treatment in the world. It's not going to move the needle that much.
The recovery road walking that you did, the big one last year and a bigger one this year, is it going to be an annual event? You're going to do another one next year?
Yeah, I think we're going to do some version of this. I've already started thinking to myself, I'm fortunate that I own a consulting business and have really good leadership in place, that I can step away and that I can tune into meetings from my phone for 3+ months. But I don't know that that's going to be the case every year. So we'll have to figure out how this looks. But yeah, an annual campaign to really have people out moving, having conversation, bringing awareness to the problem, and raising some money along with it. We'll do something every year. And we have these walks all the time in the US in fall, National Recovery Month. People go on our biggest walk in Minnesota is a 1-mile walk around the state capitol. That brings thousands of people together. It's an event, it's a day event. You have conversations, speakers, etc. But they can make a pretty big bang with a 1-mile walk. So we'll find some kind of middle ground there for sure. But, we'll talk to a lot more people. It was nice out there what we did. What we found hard was that community engagement piece, mostly because you guys are from halfway across the country. We don't know who you are. We've never met any of them. So it just wasn't the same. But now that we're in the backyard and, we work and have a presence in terms of industry leadership in this state, it'll be a lot easier to engage people.
Are there any places that you're looking forward to seeing that you haven't been to before?
I've already kind of started to play with this in my head. The first leg up the north shore, the north side of Lake Superior, is a long walk, and there's a hiking trail, Superior Hiking Trail, that everybody talks about. I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be warm enough then to walking that leg all the way up to the northwest corner. That's going to be amazing. And then the last leg when we come back, so we start kind of below the halfway point, and then this little leg is the last one. This one's going to be pretty beautiful too, because it'll be prime time in terms of fall, and the colors going through the valleys and the bluffs and the mountains right along the Mississippi River to wrap the thing up. So those two, the beginning and the end, I'm looking forward to. The kind of Dakota borders and even the northwest part. The first leg, last leg, the whole eastern side of the state runs along water, mountains, bluffs, etc. It'll be good.
Some really great work being done by Jason there. It's great to be able to combine walking with making a huge difference in people's lives. I think if I was to do that perimeter walk, I'd choose Rutland here in the UK, a huge 95 miles, even though I'm not from there. Smallest in the US, I guess, would be Rhode Island, which is probably close to 400 miles, although that would be a very nice walk, except for the part where you have to cross the 95 highway. I remember once driving through Hartford, Connecticut on the 95, and it runs right through the middle of the city. The speed limit is 60 miles an hour, that is, and I was doing maybe 62 in the correct lane for where I was headed, and there was a car right behind me flashing me to get out of the lane. Of course, I didn't. The car flew around me and cut me off, and it was a tiny old woman, maybe in her 70s, and she flipped me the finger and brake checked me at 60 miles an hour. Fortunately, there was nothing in the lane to the left, so I had to swerve around her. And I have heard similar stories. Maybe it's the same woman. I guess if I was to do the perimeter of where I live, South Ayrshire, that would be more than Rutland, but definitely not as much as Minnesota. The East Riding of Yorkshire, where I'm from originally, would be a little bit more than South Ayrshire. Maybe one day. No doubt the biggest perimeter of anywhere I've lived would be Ontario. And that would take a while because a lot of it is water and it's probably about 6,000 miles around. So that will do it for this week. If you do have news or suggestions for podcast guests, please do get in touch through jim@walkingpost.com Always looking for guests, whether it's about a new trail, new equipment, a new book, or someone who has done an amazing, unusual, or interesting walk somewhere. So, I hope you enjoyed this week's WalkingPost.com podcast, and I hope you have a great week ahead, hopefully with a walk somewhere, anywhere, without rain, please. And to think when we lived in Nevada, I missed the rain. Until next time, happy trails! Walking Post from WalkingPost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.